Hello and welcome to this session of In Dialogue Foundation Certificate course in Dialogue Studies 2024-2025. I'm Sonal Hikre, a peace ambassador and a volunteer at the In Dialogue Foundation. Today, we have the pleasure of having Professor Satish Deshpande with us. Satish Deshpande holds an MA in Economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University and an MA and Ph.D. from California. He was Professor of Sociology at Delhi University, and his research interests include caste and class inequalities, contemporary social theory, politics, and history of the social sciences, and South-South interactions. He is the author of Contemporary India, a Sociological View, and co-author with Ghanshyam Shah, Mander, Sukhadeo Thorat, and Amita Baviskar of Untouchability in Rural India. He has edited The Problem of Caste and co-edited the following volumes: Anthropology in the East, Founders of Indian Sociology and Anthropology, Beyond Inclusion, the Practice of Equal Access in Indian Higher Education, and Sectarian Violence in India, Hindu-Muslim Conflict, 1966 to 2015. Professor Deshpande retired from the Department of Sociology in April 2023. He'll be speaking on this topic, Challenges of Dialogue in the Age of Internet and Social Media. So, you have up to 2 hours for this session. You may leave as much time for the questions and discussion as you like. So, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to mention my institutional affiliation. I'm currently a visiting professor at the Institute for Social and Economic Change at Bengaluru. This is I think I'm required to say that since we are. Yes. So all of you are supposed to be seen and not heard for the next 40 minutes while I speak, I suppose. The good part, from your point of view, I think, is that, well, depends on how you look at it. I've decided to speak on something on which I have no official expertise. And in fact, I've chosen to speak on a subject on which I am fairly certain that you know more than I do. So why am I speaking on this, apart from just perversity? Is because I'm concerned about this subject. So I had slightly changed the title to read Communication in the Age of Internet and Social Media. So let's start there, and I will try and finish in about 40 or 45 minutes and leave time for question, answer, and so on. But I'm quite serious about this in the sense that this is not an area of my academic expertise. It is an area of great concern, not just for me, but I'm sure for many people. So I'm hoping that there will be some freshness to this. Otherwise, speaking about the same things that I've been speaking about on for many decades has its own downsides. Okay, so communication in the age of internet and social media. Now, you know that you're there, you're part of this course as part of something called Indialogue. And the idea of dialogue is central to this, right? So dialogue is a form of communication, but communication is a broader term, right? So dialogue is a subset of communication. So the question I'm proposing here is, if dialogue is a subset of communication, let's first talk about what has happened to communication. And so that then we can face this question, address this question of, is contemporary communication after internet and social media? I'm going to say ISM for internet and social media because I'll be saying that very often. So is contemporary communication after ISM more or less conducive to dialogue? Right? That's the question I want to address. So for the moment, we are not going to define dialogue too precisely. I leave that to you to think of whatever you want to put into that term. But there are certain minimum requirements that, just for the pure sake of the word having some stable meaning, broadly speaking, it requires. So what would be these minimum requirements? The minimum requirements would be, I suppose, reciprocity. Dialogue means a two-way conversation. So there has to be some reciprocity. It is not a monologue. So it requires more than one voice. And also, I suppose it requires, although this is not strictly necessary, you can have dialogue in hierarchical conditions. Your standard classroom is a very good example of that. But I think the idea of dialogue, at least the kind of dialogue that Indialog is interested in, has as a requirement some form of broad equality. Now, equality is a very difficult thing to find in real life. We know that, even though it's a very attractive idea and it's a very powerful idea. But in real life, there are always ifs and buts. There are always limitations to this. But within that, some basic equality. And finally, I think dialogue presupposes an openness, willingness to listen. So if you think of these three things as constituting a very broad sense of dialogue, let's go back to communication and look at what has happened to communication in the age of ISM, in the age of internet and social media. So I'll start with some very broad implications that I'm sure you're familiar with already, but I will just list them, talk about them a little bit, and then we will go on to talk about these implications in 4 areas or fields that I would like us to think about and, if you like, dialogue about today. What are the implications of, what have been the implications for communication of the internet and social media age, the ISM age? I think the first, it seems to me the first, but you can have a different ordering. One of the first consequences of this age is that it seems to promote production over consumption. That is, producers of messages are privileged in the age of internet and social media in a way that they never were before. This is tied, what I'm saying is tied to the second implication or feature, if you like, implicit feature, and a claim that is often made on behalf of the ISM age is democratization. The democratization of channels of communication, means of communication, of the availability of self-expression for very large numbers, as historically unprecedented in terms of the broadening of the democratization of public forms of public communication. So this democratization implies, in a very real sense, the somewhat marginalization, to some degree, marginalization of otherwise very central, very important forms of control over expression. So, for example, a newspaper, if you think of print media, newspapers or books, there are newspaper editors, there are publishers, which act as gatekeepers for these forms of public of expression. In general, the age of ISM seems to have pushed these forms of control or gatekeeping to the side. They have not gone away, as we will see later. They have not gone away at all. But their shape has changed and the amount of leeway they allow has changed. So, second aspect is democratization. There are some more aspects that are more sort of narrower, if you like. One most obvious is speed. in the internet and social media age, the speed of communication is again historically unprecedented. It is not just speed, it is its reach is instantaneous reach is without spatial limits, more or less, right? And this has never been true in history before. Secondly, it is almost costless. Yes, we know about the digital divide, and that's a real thing in many of our countries, including in this country. But despite that, despite the reality of the digital divide, it is true that communication has become costless, available to large numbers. A final implication here would be that, and again in a very broad sense, communication after ISM seems to privilege quantity over quality, in the sense that frequency, speed, volume, all captured in the idea, very central, very powerful idea today of quote unquote going viral. Now, what does going viral mean? It means that something is being circulated very fast, that the velocity of circulation, a term that is used for in monetary economics, for example, for money, certain forms of money, can be used here. So the velocity of circulation has accelerated beyond imagination. And the emphasis is on very quick, very swift forms of communication that typically tend to be very standardized and flattened. The extreme end of this is the classic emoji. The emoji expresses in one small image, pre-processed, ready-to-use image. It expresses many, many emotions. And in fact, some people are claiming that human emotion is now being, in a sense, molded in terms of available emojis. So we only have the emotions for which there are emojis. I mean, we are almost reaching that stage. So the apparent privileging of the production of messages over consumption, I say apparent because if you really look at it, this is not true. Because what the ISM age is really promoting is consumption. And that too, passive consumption that gives the appearance of not being passive. So yes, you can send a like or a thumbs up or a thumbs down to a message, but you're not really producing a critique. You're not producing any arguments. You're not saying anything. And likes, forwards, retweets, all of these are truncated forms of response. So what is being actually promoted is passive consumption that gives the appearance of being active, where your action consists usually, in the vast majority of cases, of retweeting, forwarding, adding an emoji or a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever, likes, things like that. So in that sense, some theorists have said that this is the age of the prosumer, especially this whole idea of big data and so on, where all our activity on internet is like a form of labor. So even as we are consuming of the internet, internet marketing and so on has become very, very big, as we all know. Even as we are consuming in this fashion, we have become producers of data for the giant corporations who have a monopoly over this big data. So the concept of the prosumer, producer and consumer joined, but with the producer in front. What I would like to suggest to you that this is perhaps misleading and that we should be thinking in terms of the reverse. We should be thinking in terms of something that turns out to be a legitimate word, actually, although it is not in use anymore. Conducer. a consumer producer rather than a producer consumer. And as it turns out, the word conduce apparently has been in use in the English language since the 15th century. This is the Oxford English Dictionary for you. This is not no wisdom of mine. I'm very fond of dictionaries. So I have a whole collection of dictionaries. I look up dictionaries all the time. So this is a verb that has been in use since the 15th century. And it has interesting meanings. Three of them are prominent. The first is to lead together. That is to put together, to collect, to unite, to connect. Second meaning, somewhat more restricted, is to hire or to contract. That is to say, to get somebody else to do something, as different from the first meaning, which is about leading the process of collective production. And the third meaning, again very interesting, is to contribute towards something, or to be serviceable, to be useful for something. Interesting meanings, I think, particularly the first and the third. And as some of you would already know, those of you who are interested in word games in the English language, there are related words. Conduit, coming from conduce, conduct, quite important word, a very broad-based word, conducive, and so on, right? So I'm proposing to you the term conducer. Maybe somebody's already done it. As I said, I'm not an expert in this area, so maybe I'm simply quoting somebody without realizing it. But that's up to you to figure out. And I'm not claiming copyright or anything like that. I'm simply offering this to you to think about, that the ISM age produces conducers, consumers who are encouraged to pretend that they are also producers, but they are actually consumers. But in the big data sense, they are indeed producing raw material. As they say, data is the new oil, it's the new sort of primary resource, and so on. So we are doing that, right? But the democratization argument is not simply fake. There is something real about it. It is true that large numbers can actually put out things that they write without going through the gatekeeping process that used to hold them back before. And it would seem that because of the cost aspect, speed aspect, and so on, that this is really a very powerful effect, in the sense that through social media, one has access to a form of publishing, if you like, which ordinary people didn't have access to before, and which has very, very broad reach. It can go very far. So keep these in mind: the conducer, democratization, speed, almost costless, and quantity over quality, as abstract, broad implications of the ISM age. Now, these abstract implications I want to look at in four contexts, four concrete contexts. The first is that of something that I am familiar with, I've spent most of my adult life in, is higher education and academia. What does the ISM age do to higher education and academia? I'm sure you're well aware that this is a very live issue these days. Can there be education in the real sense after ChatGPT? Or what are teachers good for? Right? Is a question that is being asked these days. Higher education and academia, particularly questions of pedagogy, but also questions of authority. What is knowledge? Secondly, what I'm calling, for want of a better term, the new public sphere. The public sphere where the collective discursive space where ideas circulate, where ideologies circulate. I'm using the term ideology not in a pejorative sense. I'm talking about systematic, interlinked um, narratives about something that are mostly in the realm of ideas. So ideologies are worldviews of a kind, So in that sense, so new kinds of the rules of how engagement happens, how, if you think of it as a game, if you think of the public sphere and public discourse, public debate as a kind of game, the rules of the game seem to have been changed dramatically with ISM. So that's the second sphere. The third sphere I want to look at is perhaps the one that we need to research more on. We are aware that things are happening, but compared to the other fields, there isn't really much, as much research as there should be. This is the world of the everyday. Social relations and the everyday. How have they been impacted by the ISM age? So that's the third area I want to look at. And the fourth area, again, very much in the news and something you'll all be well aware of, new forms of surveillance and control that the ISM age makes possible. So let's look at these four areas and remember the implications we spoke of, the abstract implications: conducer, democratization, speed, costlessness, quantity over quality. How do those things affect higher education and the academia? Now, straight away, we have the huge challenge in academic, particularly in higher education. In fact, in all levels of education, I would say, but perhaps the impact is felt most strongly in higher education because of the need now to need, and at the same time the great difficulty of distinguishing between information and knowledge. Why am I saying that higher education is in more trouble than, say, school education? Because in school education, it had already become possible for students to acquire the information that teachers imparted at the school level through other means. This was not fully true of higher education. So a large portion of the, it's very humbling to think of this as teachers, but I do belong to the generation which has to admit this. A large portion of the prestige of the teacher was as a conveyor of information, right? The teacher knew more than students. That's common perception. Today, students are almost certain to know more than teachers, or at least to find out within 5 minutes more than what the teacher might have studied and sort of very painstakingly arrived at. Particularly an older generation teacher like myself, who's not so adept in searches and things like that. And particularly with mobile phones, because you can carry them around in your pocket. If you can access knowledge with a capital K, with it's in your pocket, then why do you need teachers, right? So there is indeed a sort of crisis. But of course, we are teachers always fond of saying that information is not knowledge. So then, but today, how do we distinguish between the two? Because, and here I will use this as a bridge to go to the next area of the public sphere and ideologies, because the ISM age has given birth to a new form of authority, a form of authority in the field of knowledge, a form of authority based on social media and quantity. So what do I mean by this? I mean the form of knowledge where, which is the term that was made famous by the US President Trump's press advisor, is alternative facts. So alternative facts gain their authority from the fact that lots of people believe them. So when there are these things that have been forwarded 300,000 times or something on WhatsApp, they acquire authority purely by that. Something that goes viral on social media acquires authority, and it's a new kind of authority, or it's a new source of authority. That authority is not dependent on claims to long years of study or whatever it is, sort of expertise developed over a long time, experience, etc., etc. Whatever it is that old claims to knowledge were based on. It is an entirely new claim. And this new claim is based on number and the willingness of large numbers to believe this. Once that happens, it becomes hard to brush aside these forms of knowledge. So just to finish with the higher education, we will use this as a bridge, this new form of authority as a bridge to move to public sphere. But before that, let me finish with the higher education. So in the struggle to find convincing answers after ISM to the question, what are teachers good for? You could think of a few things that if knowledge is greater than, if you want to assign a greater than sign between knowledge and information to say that knowledge is more than information, then in what sense is it more? It's more in the sense I feel that there are many things that are required beyond the sheer transaction of information, which we have to admit the ISM age is super efficient at. What are those things? First, you have to assess the truthfulness or accuracy of what you're getting. There are ways to short circuit this, as in the case of what I just spoke of, the new forms of alternative facts. But nevertheless, there is that need to evaluate information, for which maybe a teacher-like being is still necessary. Maybe ChatGPT will start doing that as well, but at the moment, it has to be done by human beings. Most important, I think, particularly in the social sciences, but more or less everywhere, is that information needs to be contextualized. Often information without context is either meaningless or can be seriously misleading. And how do you determine what is the context? How do you determine where to draw the boundaries of that relevant context? This remains a question that cannot be answered within ISM, right? Within the through simply making large volumes of information available instantaneously to large numbers. Finally, there is the need to be aware of counter arguments or alternative positions to the positions that are circulated. So for these reasons, maybe there is still something to be said for higher education and academia, but there is a serious crisis today, particularly as artificial intelligence begins to take over the more mechanical aspects of decision-making, of evaluation, and so on. What used to be called expert systems are now going to become far, far more sophisticated, with fuzzy logic and AI taking fuzzy logic now to a new level. Okay, so now let's move to the public sphere of ideology, the discursive space, and this new form of authority that for brevity, to keep it short, I'm calling alternative facts. Now, alternative facts are quite a revolutionary thing because the 20th century was the age of facts. It was the age of science. It was the age of the broadening of a lot of what we now know as modern education, modern science, and so on. And there's a very, very important book by Mary Poovey that you should look at, The History of the Modern Fact. She is talking about what would be probably closer to economic or statistical facts, but nevertheless, the argument she's making is valid for facts in general. So what we are doing is we are transcending the age of fact. Alternative fact ends the monopoly of fact over authoritative knowledge and puts into circulation many competitors who do not have to pass through the same gatekeeping processes that the old kind of knowledge used to pass through. So how did you claim to be that your opinion was better than somebody else's? Because you could quote authorities, quote what are called authorities in your favor. And those authorities in turn, their authority was from their many degrees, their many years of research, or their experience in a certain field, etc., etc. So now, as against that, you have alternative facts, which are fueled by what is driving them. What is driving them is large numbers believe them, and that, in a sense, sidelines the question of their truth value. That's what an alternative fact is. So, as has been said now, it's quite common that we live now in a post-truth age, where we have to reckon with this. So what does this do to the public sphere? The most obvious effects of this is the weaponization of the social media. Now, across the world, and particularly in this country, in India, in the last 10 years, we have been witness to the unprecedented weaponization of social media, which has led to lynchings of various kinds. There's a huge literature now on how social media, particularly WhatsApp, because WhatsApp has played a very big role in countries like India, all over Africa. There's a whole library of research, by the way, on Africa, on what WhatsApp has done in Africa. So you will remember, some of you, 2018, there was a spate of lynchings because of rumors of child lifting or child kidnapping across the country. And the magazine India Today had done a special issue on it, and so on. So it's not only the purely political, although there have also been those hate crimes, lynchings of the more common kind that we now recognize, usually of Muslims, but sometimes also of other minorities, sometimes due to mistaken identity. And this is made possible by all the things we spoke of about ISM, that it is instantaneous communication, it is fast, it is costless, etc., etc., right? So because of this, it is possible to weaponize hate and to produce results, to produce events in a way that it was not possible before. Hate has always existed, and the desire to weaponize hate has always existed. But ISM has put into play a new hardware, if you like, for it, that is very, very effective. And we need to, the age of the IT cell. Now, the IT cell seems to be, especially in electoral politics, and most democracies are now no longer democracies, they are electocracies, where everything depends on winning the election. And there is a whole technology of winning elections. And no matter what your ideology, it's only if you're good at that technology that you can win elections. So in this kind of a context, IT cells become very important for political power as well. And the weaponization works in so many different ways that there is no option. There is no option but to get involved. You can't, at least I can't think of a political party of any seriousness that stays out of social media and says, no, we are not going to go into social media, but we are a political party. It's not possible to say that today. Let's come to everyday life. As I said, this is an area that needs more research. We haven't, compared to the other areas we're speaking about, there has been less research here. But people have been talking about it. What is happening to social relations because of ISM is a question to consider. Some of the things that have been brought up is the truncation of communication. I already spoke of emojis. So instead of taking the trouble to express yourself, you can simply forward an emoji. You can just put in an emoji. On the one hand, there were arguments that communication has become easier. Usually the common anecdotal evidence that is produced for this is the ubiquitousness of the WhatsApp video meet, whether it is NRI family meeting with their family in India, whether it is some research group, whether it is a political party, whether it's all kinds of people have these groups and they can meet much more easily. But at the same time, there are certain conditions for using this media. And those conditions involve the things that I have been speaking of, the truncation, standardization. Now, the emojis are only the most extreme form, where emotion is standardized in a particular way. And it becomes harder and harder for people to imagine emotions for which there are no emojis, or in the same way, to think of forms of expression, to think of saying something for which there doesn't already exist an idiom in the SMS language or the language of texting, which is all about brevity, all about acronyms, all about short forms. And what this shortening does to the texture of human relations is something we need to think about. And also the substitution of digital contact for actual face-to-face contact. Again, we have to think about what are the consequences of this. The convenience of this is so much that now we don't go to the trouble of actually visiting someone or traveling to meet someone. We just have an online meeting. So what is that doing to social relations? We need to think about this. There's also a fair amount of literature now on especially young adults, adolescents, teenagers, and the consequences of their involvement in social media. And cases of shaming on social media, various kinds of scandals that came out in schools with once the multimedia phones, once smartphones became available and images could be transmitted. There have been many suicides caused by this form of harassment, and particularly for women and other vulnerable groups, minorities of various kinds, this has proved to be a huge problem. And while on the one hand, you can say that the media, social media is available to everyone, that is not actually the case. And the shaming, canceling, and so on that goes on amongst young people is a very serious thing. It has serious consequences, emotional consequences, and consequences for the coming generation and what forms communication will take, and so on. In general, what the everyday life in the age of ISM seems to be about quickness of response. That's what social media is about, right? You have to respond immediately, very quickly, and very briefly. You can't write an essay on SMS. It has to be just a few words and so on. So standardization and mass production of expression. On the one hand, the claim is that self-expression is encouraged by ISM. On the other hand, there are strict limits placed on the form that this expression can take. Okay, finally, now I'm coming to surveillance. control. It is remarkable how unidimensional human communication is becoming. If you reflect on what proportion of our interpersonal communications are now digital, now passed through ISM, including what we are doing right now. I'm speaking to you through internet, and right. So because of this, wholly unprecedented possibilities of surveillance and control have been created. So while on the one hand, ISM seems to encourage expression, democratize expression, make it costless, available to everyone, etc., etc. On the other hand, by massive centralization, that centralization is not immediately visible to us. It is mind-boggling to think of the amount of information about us that, say, Google or Microsoft have. And this is quite independently of our intentions, our desires, and so on. This much information, no dictator, no secret police have ever had before. This volume of information. And as initially it was felt that the sheer volume was protection in itself, right? If there are however many billion pages that are supposed to be on the internet, what is it now? I have no idea what the number is now, but many times more than the human population. How are you going to search, right? But as you know, I mean, the growth of internet, in fact, was predicated on search engine technology. And so search engine technology has been one of the most heavily invested by military investment has gone into search engine technologies across the world, right? Everybody now knows, at least in India, about Israel and Pegasus software, so on. Like that, there are all kinds of software we have never heard of. And be assured that any software you have heard of is not at the cutting edge. The cutting edge is elsewhere, and it will be all very secret and very this thing. So there has been, unknowingly perhaps, extreme centralization of forms of communication. And because of this extreme centralization, there are now the possibilities, unprecedented possibilities of control. As you know, some of the more crude forms of control we are familiar with in India. India leads the world in the number of internet shutdowns per time period by a margin, by a huge margin. Anywhere there are riots, anywhere there are any kind of disturbance, immediately the local authorities shut down the internet. Think of how easy it is to shut down the internet. On the one hand, we say that the internet is everywhere and that it is the closest thing to God we have, and that we have experienced, the being that can be everywhere at once. But on the other hand, it takes about 15 minutes to shut down internet, right? And remember, this can again be scaled. So you can shut down internet in the whole country in a multiple of 2 or 3 or 15 minutes. So in 1 hour, you can shut down internet in the whole of India. So it's a very chilling thought. I mean, if you think about this, it's like being able to gag people, millions of people within an hour. It's just our minds can't kind of stretch to contain this. Few companies, this has again been written about a lot, especially platforms of various kinds, and all those who deal in the traffic in data, have a stranglehold not only on the world's economy, but on the world, full stop. So more than any, I mean, name the worst dictator that you've ever thought of, 10 times worse than that, n number of times worse than that would be these 5, 6 huge corporations: Google, Netflix, Meta, Microsoft, and so on. Right? There are 2-3 more. That's it, though. It's you can count on fingers of 2 hands the number of corporations that own all the data in the world. Or to translate that into more into the terms we are interested in here, that have access to all human communication. Yes, we occasionally still do speak to each other in person. That does happen. It's not yet become part of history. But such a large proportion of our communication happens digitally that we have to recognize this as a historically unprecedented, a new moment where so few have so much control over so much of humanity. So, internet, social media, their impact on communication, we come back to the question of where is dialogue in all this? Does this help dialogue? Does this hurt dialogue of the kind that we are interested in? Now, that question I leave you to think about, and we can talk about it in question and answer. And I'll stop here. It's almost exactly 45 minutes, so I have not, breached my contract with you.
Absolutely not, sir. And thank you for this eye-opening session. I hope all of you must have learned a lot from this session and taken a lot from this session. So the floor is open for the questions. If you need to ask any question, please raise your hand and go forward to ask the question. Please don't
Realize that
hesitate.
raising your hand means something very different today?
Yes. It's not raising the hand. You can use the emoji of raising a hand. Yes, we have our first person, Mr. Ranveer Singh. Please unmute and ask the question.
I can't see you. Where are you?
Can you see me right now? There is only one third here. You can see me quite.
Yes, but you the pictures keep moving on the screen, so that's right. For some reason. Anyway,
that's all part of this ISM thing. Okay, so this is not a direct question to you regarding the thing which we were discussing, but just an insight which I would like to share. One that while you were just discussing this whole thing, that how it impacted the communication per se, and when we are talking about the flow of the information and the magnitude of that information, now I think we have not been trained to question at the very first place during the whole socialization process. And until unless we are questioning anything, how you or we will be validating the fact whatever we are getting exposed to. So that's the very fundamental challenge which we are facing. I think we should appreciate Kerala model. Recently, Kerala SEART, they introduced module on fact checkings for the school children. So how to tackle the fake news and also just how to validate the information, check the validity, authenticity and all. So this is just one thought which came to my head, that yesterday we were discussing something, and I raised a point that I consider that the family is a very repressive institution. So it doesn't give us that, in majority of the families, it doesn't give us that frame to establish a dialogue, or to even just to put forward the questions or to challenge anybody else's opinion who is having a better authority than us. Now this is just one thought. So second, I would like to share that it came to my head, so I thought that I should talk about this thing. It's exactly the kind of reverse engineering which I do. I teach here in Central University Jammu in social work department. So one of the class in the beginning of the semester, I engage with my students, PG students. So the class is all about that within social sciences, what not to read. We always tell them that, okay, what to read, look for this, look for these readings. But it is very essential nowadays to talk about what not to read. So this session is all about that how, what kind of knowledge is more authenticated, more authoritative as compared to other. So how you can just differentiate those things and all. So that kind of session, I think that has to be promoted widely also. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful insight to just listen to you. I think anybody else will be just saying something, we can just pitch in between. Thank you.
Thank you. No, they're very good points these were. Thank you. We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anveer Singh, for this insightful input. Jay has raised his hand, but I think he's not in the meeting right now. Jalil, you can go ahead. Okay. Yeah. Jay, you're here?
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to ask the question, or shall I let Jalil do that?
Yeah, I had a question for basically in this only. It's an extension of a question I asked yesterday's session also. So, basically, my question
was yesterday's session on?
It was on types of dialogue, but yeah, the sort of conversation went in this direction, but in the direction of technology and artificial intelligence, right? And dialogue with technology. So, when we talk about how social media has basically, you talked about how it's more quantity now and above quality, but even with the quantity, we see a lot of isolation happening in the age of social media, right? So do you have any insight on that? Basically, this, very prevailing sense of isolation that we witness nowadays, because if you look at even if you read the basically news that is happening, you see a lot of youth feels isolated, but they have access to Instagram, they have access to WhatsApp, so Snapchat, all kinds of social media. They can easily connect with friends, but it's still this isolation that is happening. So do you have any insights on that?
So let's collect a couple more, then we'll. There are two hands, I think I can see.
Yes, all right. Jalil, you can go ahead.
You just said that the information and the contextualization, information without contextualization, maybe there is no meaning, otherwise it's misleading, this kind of narration. But my concern is, can ISM make this kind of contextualization also a method of information, or a set of information? There are so many narrations like that. First one is this, and second question is, there are so many platforms in social media, like Facebook is there, Instagram is there, Twitter is there, and every platform have its own nature, its own characteristics. Then, like Instagram is much influenced by the youngsters, while the Facebook is just kind of, it's a father or uncle's platform. This kind of narrations also there. Then this distinction, I'm not making any statement, this kind of only narrations. Then there is this kind of different distinct narration according to each and every platform. Then how this kind of narration influence the dialogue within these or through each and every platform? This is my two questions.
There's one more hand.
And just a minute, Puvi. Yeah, okay. One more question also though. That means there are so many studies, very deep studies on public sphere. But the trending culture of the social media of nowadays making a very distinct kind of public space. I mean, even the trending, obviously, it's never long lasting for more than 2 or 3 weeks. It's just for short time. Then this also influenced the public sphere concept also. I mean, even the Habermas also make a influence of media on this public sphere, and it is enough. Then this short-term trending, how it's influenced on a long-lasting, long-term public sphere. This is my third question. Thank you.
Yes, I think.
Shall I go ahead?
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for an amazing presentation. And I have happened to have read few because I'm a student of JNU from Center of Social Medicine, like Ranveer sir and a few others. We've read your papers on social theory of understanding. And it's not a question because Jay and Jaleel have already asked the kind of questions I wanted to ask. More or less, so something we talk about public sphere and public ideology, like how you said. So I've combined two of my professions, and they are medical profession, and now I'm into politics. Both of these spheres are heavily influenced by social media and how patients come to you. They've already gone through it. What are the symptoms? What can be done? And also the kind of narrative that builds on social media. I am honestly very, very scared. Very scared. So they say it's the term of it's a digital age. But I per se, I want to remain into that analog mode. I do not want to go on social media most of the times. But then I'm also missing out on a lot of information. Especially, we refer to Twitter. I don't go to Facebook, but we have to refer to Twitter, understanding what's happening on a daily basis. Because there are also scientific pages and political pages and also certain other areas. And I just want to know, how can I make this dialogue easier when it comes to dealing with family members regarding the alternative facts, dealing with my constituents, because I have to engage with them through social media and I don't want that. But you can't really go out every day, hold a meeting. It is not cost effective, not possible in weather conditions as well. So I'd like your opinion on that.
Okay, so shall we begin with these? And then we can come back for a next round.
All right.
Unless somebody has a burning question that cannot wait.
I can wait, it's okay.
Okay, so let's take these. Remember what I said in the beginning? That this is an area where I have no expertise, right? So I'm very happy to take questions because I'm not responsible for answers, right? Or rather, I'm as responsible as you are, right? We are all responsible. At one level, this is very deadly serious stuff, right? It affects all of us. So in a sense, it frees me up, right? I don't have to speak as the expert. But let's, as thinking beings, which is apparently an endangered species these days, we have to try and, engage with this. So what Ranveer was saying is, I think, absolutely true, that we are not trained to question. But Ranveer, I would like you to take two steps more. Because in one way, I mean, I'm also saying what Jaleel was saying, that ISM also provides context. ISM also provides questions, right? So the thing is that it is not just questioning for the sake of questioning, but questioning with integrity. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but questioning where you want to go somewhere with that question. Questioning where your questioning is coming from somewhere, where you have some reason to question, right? So we have to think these things through, and that's where I think that's where we have to fault. That's where we have to fight with and fault ISM, because ISM will in one way give us everything prepackaged. Whatever it is that you want to define as desirable, ISM is capable of producing it. But the thing is that it will be prepackaged. It will be ready to wear, ready to eat, ready to circulate as your opinion, right? ISM will give you things that it will give you your opinion every day. Any subject you want, it will give you your opinion. If you want, it will give you a choice of opinions also, right? So what we perhaps need to do is to link it to lives, and link it to where do we want to go, what do we want in larger sense, and focus on that. And it's easy to say, it's very hard to, because everybody will claim that they are doing exactly this. So and Ranveer, I was really struck by your idea of what not to read. We were very worried in our time about reverse psychology. That if you told somebody not to read this, the first thing they would do is go and read it. Right? Like that tendency is also there. But today is a different age. I agree entirely. And I think people will realize also, your students will realize what you mean when you say, do not read XYZ and so on. Because there is so much toxic material out there. And not just toxic in a communal sense or one of those few senses that get talked about a lot, but it's toxic for your brain, for your ability to think, for your ability to be a human being. So I think you're absolutely right. Jay's question, I'm also clueless here. I lasted about 2 weeks on Facebook and I couldn't manage after that. It was just too breathless. So you have to respond to like so many people. I just couldn't handle it. And I'm not on any other social media. So I'm quite unable to. But this isolation is, like the film songs say, bheed mein bhi akela. That kind of effect it definitely produces. I mean, by the way, that song business is where you feel alone in a crowd. That it's a popular theme in film songs and so on. So ISM has the effect of creating a crowd in terms of messages, in terms of virtual personalities, virtual meetings, and so on, without giving you whatever it is that actual interaction with other human beings gives, including fights and including disappointments, including all the things that happen in our relationships. It tries to give that in a again, in a pre-packaged, in a pre-processed way. And especially for young people, I think it's an overwhelming world. And that's why there has been so much concern, particularly about teenagers, where you're exposed to a world for which you're simply not prepared. I mean, we have been saying for quite some time now that there is no childhood left, etc., etc. A lot of nonsense has also been said about childhood. I mean, especially in this country. Maybe the gods of ISM didn't like something I was saying, so I didn't even realize I was muted. See, this was my big nightmare with online teaching. We had to do almost 2 years of online teaching, where my nightmare was all students have me muted and are doing something else, and I'm just talking to this, to this empty screen. That's why I really realized, that's when I realized that even bored faces in front of you are so valuable, as from the point of view of a teacher. Anyway, what were we talking about? Yeah, we were talking about this emotional turmoil that ISM creates for young people.
Yeah.
Because you don't have time to assimilate, right? I mean, it's a question of extremes. It's not just take a simple, obvious type of example, pornography. Now, all teenagers are curious, and there's always this thing of, like trying to experiment, trying to find something. Now, in the print era, what you could access was completely harmless compared to what is accessible today. So in the same way, violence, whatever other things you want to think of, extremes are available effortlessly. And that is for people without the emotional training, with just not enough time on earth to have the bandwidth to take in the immense amounts of nastiness that human beings are capable of. And it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. And there's this thing of privacy versus free expression versus the rights of corporations and so on. And that tug of war is being played out. So you have raised a very important issue, and I'm sure others will have opinions on this as well. Coming now to Jalil, what he was saying, I agree about context being provided. See, the problem is not what is provided and what is not provided. The problem is in the way things are provided. They are, what we call in Indian languages, or in some Indian languages, I should say, vivek or discernment, the ability to judge, in the old original sense of discriminate, to be able to tell good from bad. Now that is a processual learnt thing, right? It's not a formula. It's not that you eat something or you take an online class and that's it. You know how to distinguish good from evil, right from wrong, and so on. And it is this is a very contextual process. That is the discernment that you learn, the judgment that you acquire is related to your life conditions. It is related to your life goals. It's not an abstract skill that is just portable, that is transplantable. So, and in part, that is what context means. And that's what ISEM is not able to provide. And in fact, it produces the opposite anxiety. It produces the anxiety that the context that is offered ought to be your context. And you're under anxiety attacks because of the gap between that context and your actual real context. You want your context to look like that, but it doesn't, and it kind of makes you very agitated and so on. And remember, for these generations, and when I say these generations, it's probably true for most of you, they don't know the era before ISM. When my son was 7 years old, he thought I was simply lying to him when I said that when I was 7 years old, there was no TV. He literally did not believe it. So in that sense, for a generation that has known nothing else, it is really overwhelming. And I think we don't have answers. I mean, it's still, I don't think there's any real... this regimentation, no mobile phones and so on, is not a workable thing in the long run. And it only invites transgression. It only invites you to experiment and so on. About platforms and their individual characteristics, you will have to, say more, Jalil, because I have no idea. I'm told that Facebook is for old people now and so on, but I'm not even on Facebook. So, what can I say? It's one of the great things, that you learn with experience as a teacher is when to say clearly you don't know. And then not proceed to then nevertheless still talk about it. So this is something about the individual character of platforms and their implications. I leave to you, to people who know this, to talk about. And trending, yes, trending is like going viral, right? It's the more respectable term for going viral. Well, going viral, there's something mildly, vulgar about it. Whereas trending is quite cool. You would like to be called trending. You won't necessarily always like to be called, something's going viral. So what is this doing? And yes, I agree that that's what is happening. But it's another way in which quantity is ruling over quality, or is determining quality. In fact, is deciding on quality. So something that goes viral or something that is trending is like the authority I was talking about. It gains something purely by that volume of circulation. So yeah, I mean, we have to think of what the consequences are for that. As attention spans grow shorter and shorter, perhaps it doesn't matter. Perhaps we are all well matched. As ISM develops, the human attention span will also, will converge, so that what is now 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol once said, it will now become like, 5 seconds or whatever it is, however much time it takes for a meme to register. Purvi's question, again, a difficult question. Again, I don't know. I don't have experience of this to talk about. In the medical profession in particular, I think is afflicted by this availability of information. Everybody looks up their symptoms and they come to you with a diagnosis and simply want you to medicate. that happens. But on the other hand, you have to think about the bad aspects of the old doctor as God kind of model, where the patient had simply no alternatives. Even as you know, I'm sure, even the so-called second opinion is a very tricky thing. And it's not, you don't just stroll across for a second opinion. You have to think about what, especially if there are long-term relations involved and so on. So authority is a very double-edged thing. It's not such a bad thing for authority to be questioned now and then. And I'm not instinctively not inclined to agree with the proposition that some areas of authority are more sacrosanct than other areas of authority. We have to think about that. Yes, people can do harm to themselves, but people can do harm to themselves mentally, not necessarily physiologically. They can do harm to others, incalculable harm to others, without ever coming within 1 feet of them. We all know how to do that now, right? So this is a very mixed thing. We have to think about it. And once again, it's a question of going back to what Ranveer was saying, we have to not just be able to ask questions, we have to be able to take our questions somewhere, take them somewhere and compare differing positions and try our best to evaluate and so on. And yes, as experts, as people in positions of authority, we don't like it when our old authority is eroded. But this is the challenge we have to face. All of us who are in positions of authority, in positions of knowing, quote unquote, in whatever field, even though, yes, some technical fields are more privileged, where knowledge there is supposed to be more objective or, more. But we all know that there are limits to that. And there are questions there as well. So very good very promising first set of responses and conversation. So yes, dialogue.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I really don't know how to pronounce your name, girl, but you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm very used to that.
No, but do tell us how to pronounce your name.
Yeah, my name is Juldis.
Juldis.
Yes. So hello, guys. I have a question. So we all know that tragic incident that happened in 1994 in Rwanda, between ethnic groups of Hutus and Tutsis, yes. And my question is about, in your opinion, is it effective? I mean, does it have positive effect or negative effect? Mentioning on social media this kind of tragic, tensions or wars that happened. For example, I've read one research paper based in 2021. Yes. In 2021, there was 20 years of tragic situation in New York, 9/11 thing. And the statement, this hypothesis of that research paper was that mentioning that it happened 20 years ago arose big, tensions on social media, on streets, among Muslims and others, Or, for example, the same thing happened in 2004 when they again mentioned the Rwanda genocide. So what do you think? Is it effective to acknowledge sometimes? Because, for example, I'm from Kazakhstan, and still on every 9th May, we have a big celebration that Second World War was ended by, by victory of USSR. You got me? And some people, especially millennials, they make these writings on their car, like Germans, we can repeat what we have done in 1945. Personally, I find it very inhuman, to be honest, to that kind of expressions, yes. But what do you think? Is it okay? Does it have a negative or positive effect to mention it on social media? This kind of big historical moments. Or, for example, last year, the demolishment of Babri Masjid, for example, and opening of Ayodhya, it was a big thing, for example, that Ayodhya temple opened, yes, but also mentioning the violence that was done by Mughal Empire in India, in Bharat, yes, for example. Yeah, that aroused many violence, real, human violence. For example, I stay in Delhi's Okla, okay, in Jasola side, there was wild things that happened. Then I thought, like, why not just to mention that, wow, finally we opened our temple. Yeah, let's have a big celebration of that. But of course, history cannot be denied too. So what do you think there? How can we find that, that gold middleness, I can say? Yeah. So I hope you got me. I talk much, sorry.
No, you didn't. You were very eloquent. Somebody else had a question, I think. Yes, Ijaz.
Hello, sir. You have speech, a very good lecture about social media and internet. Now, everybody have concerning about the internet and the social media. Now, the age is era of the social media and internet. But, sir, as we know, whenever technologies comes in the real world, sir, everyone concerning about advantage and disadvantage. As we knew about in 90s when computer has come, sir, everyone erased about the disadvantage that it will create unemployment, which was fact. But nowadays, after decade past, now we can't think the world without computer nowadays. Now my question is, and also concern is, sir, how we are blaming to the Communist Party at that time. They were not supporting to bring the computers in the real world. Now I'm also complaining about that times against communist government and whoever against the computer. So my question and concern also is my child after decade past will complain about me that why you are concerning about the social media and the internet after decade past. Now we are concerning about the internet and the social media because of we are seeing the lots of problems are coming from the social media. But after decade past, how we are blaming to the Communist Party and others, whoever against the computer is my son or the new generation who will come after 10 years or 20 years will blame us that why you guys are concerning about the social media internet, sir.
Yes, Suman, go ahead.
Sir, I have 3 questions to you. First question is, sir, how do ISM facilitate the different movements, different social movements and activism, like Me Too movements or at present the Justice for Abhay movement? So how do ISM facilitate all these movements and what are the role of dialogue to reconcile all these things? So this is my first question. Second question is that, sir, do you think the monetized content creation altered the media landscape? Because previously we are used to TV, then YouTube videos, now we are moving to the shorts. So the entire monetization economy, do you think it's responsible for alteration for the whole game? And my third question is, nowadays, government is sponsoring...
I didn't quite understand your second one. If you could just say that
okay,
again.
Sir, do you think the monetized economy could alter the entire media landscape? Because for every video, for certain views or certain reaches, the content creators are getting some amount of money because due to the monetization. So this whole monetization economy, do you think it could alter the whole media consumption and media and the types of media we are used to consume? So this is my second question, sir. And the third question is that nowadays government is sponsoring different digital initiatives, but we all know that all the digital initiatives have its own shortcomings and own risks. So, sir, what to do and how to cope up with such initiatives? We want our data safety and we don't want a state surveillance on our living. So, what are the possible ways? Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Shall we take three then?
All right.
Okay. Memorialization and celebrations. Now, should we do those on social media or not? Do we have a choice? Today, it looks like we don't have a choice. That's what it looks like to me. And in general, there were other questions also before also that raised this issue. And this is now quite commonplace in historiography, that history is always about the present. All history is presentist history. So in that sense, the past is not something, and that famous phrase, L.P. Hartley's phrase, it's not a foreign country. It's tied to interests, desires in the present. And that is what we need to address. And more generally, coming to what Ijaz was saying and what some of the questions that Suman was asking as well, there's another general issue that I would like to bring up, and this is particularly in the context of hate crimes and hate campaigns being spread on social media. Initially, there was a lot of attention to things like WhatsApp or other social media as causal effects, as causing this. But I think as we have had more experience with this slowly, at least I've come to that, and I think there are others also who think like this. I think what is really important is not the fact that this technology allows instantaneous spread of information, including false information and so on, and that it is possible to strategize, it is possible to game it, it's possible to actually deliberately spread information. And this is the difference that is made between disinformation and misinformation. Misinformation can be just a mistake, whereas disinformation is the deliberate spreading of things that you know to be not true, with some strategic end in mind. So what has seemed to me is that rather than blame the technology, which I think is not the causal factor, the causal factor is really the willingness to believe. And this willingness to believe is cultivated over a long process. And once the willingness to believe is in place, then the technology has an effect, because then the availability of the means to spread information will, otherwise, why should people believe that XYZ has happened? Sometimes they sound so bizarre that you wonder how people believe them in the first place. But this is what has happened, no? This is what has happened. People have spent a lot of time training people to believe certain kinds of news or certain kinds of things as natural, as things that are bound to happen. As we say in India, right, that XYZ kind of people are like that only, right? So there are stereotypes associated with groups, and then messages sent embodying that stereotype or as an illustration of that stereotype, and we are already pre-primed, and we believe and we act on that belief. So I think the role of technology is perhaps less central than we had thought of. It's still important. I'm not saying it's not important. But we have to focus as much on the invisible thing. Technology is very visible, right? It's talked about all the time. This kind of invisible work where people are taught in everyday life over generations to believe certain things about other people. Those mechanisms are what we need to really focus on. So yes, going back to what, and this is not directly related, but going back to what Ijaz was saying, that Ijaz, I come from when I was doing my PhD. Mainframes were the only kinds of computers around. There were no PCs. And in fact, even before that, we used to use, I don't know if anybody still remembers them, these things called typewriters, right? So, you had to actually, use strength to type on a keyboard. That was, the keyboard may be the same, but it was a whole different process. And so on. And I was very, I learned computers on mainframes, and I was very irritated. Oh, I had an Olympia, borrowed Olympia for a long time, which was a very dear friend of mine for many years. Yes, I was very irritated by PCs. And now, as you say, we can't live without PCs, right? And so I don't know what to say. I mean, this is part of change, right? And generations are, in that sense, destined to be positioned differently with respect to change. So as newer and newer generations come along, they will be positioned in relation to newer technologies. So I think rather than trying to ask whether we should be for or against new technology, we have to think of, in any given situation, what are the consequences that the technology is having on human beings? And those consequences have to be dealt with in that time. Now, times may change as a certain number of people, what it used to be called technological unemployment. That is to say, changes in technology produce a temporary kind of, economists used to call it a temporary kind of unemployment because of the change in technology. And soon that new technology would lead to an expansion of the economy, and therefore many more jobs would be created later. This was the standard sort of theory. It didn't always work out like that, but broadly speaking, true. And maybe we have reached with artificial intelligence, we have reached a saturation of that. More importantly, we now have a kind of capitalism after financialization, which does not require jobs to be created to create profits. See, in the kind of capitalism that Karl Marx knew and wrote about, his great insight was the mutual interdependence of labor and capital. That is why revolution was possible, because both needed each other, and at the same time, capital would automatically produce the preconditions for its own transcendence, for it to be transcended. Now, that symbiotic relationship seems to have broken down. And if workers are not needed, they are not needed. Large sections of the world's population today are simply surplus population. They're not surplus, not the reserve army of labor, as Marx said. They are not surplus labor. They're just surplus to requirements. They are not wanted as consumers. They are not wanted as producers. They are not wanted culturally. They're simply not wanted. And this is a very, very dangerous situation, because plus there is the technology to actually, as is happening now in Palestine, to actually erase a people from the face of this earth, right? Or at least erase them in any recognizable form. You may not actually kill every single person, but you will erase a way of life. So I don't know, I don't know what to say here, but I would like us to think about the fact that these are, in a sense, there is something unavoidable about it. There's something unavoidable about change. There's something unavoidable about generations being positioned differently, purely because they arrive at, but as they must by definition, arrive at different points in time. So how do we deal with this? And is this time-space compression, is it happening vertically also? Is it happening across generations? The chasm or the divide between generations, the vertical one, seems to be expanding, while other forms of time-space are being compressed. As the postmodern theorists have said, this time-space compression is the hallmark of postmodern society. But on the other hand, that's not happening in terms of intergenerational relations and things like that. So these are things to think about. Suman raised a number of points. Monetization of media, yes. That's what some people are saying, that now expression has become, self-expression or free expression has become a business plan. Right? For some companies, it's a business plan. So you're encouraged to express yourself, because that means you will be, clicking on this and that, and every click will produce data for companies that are mining this data for their purposes. So what do we do then? I mean, is this false? Does this mean that anybody who expresses themselves today are simply the stooges of these companies, and that self-expression has nothing to do with that person? We can't make that claim. On the other hand, it is true that there is big data. There is this encouragement or incitement to express yourself, particularly in standardized, homogenized, mass-produced forms. So we have to, figure it out in terms of where we stand on this and how we are going to deal with it, because similar crises have come in the past and somehow we have survived them. So monetization is a fact. I mean, we have to sort of take that into account. Social movements, well, it works both ways. And remember, movements that you don't like are also social movements, right? So the most spectacular cases of success are, there are half a dozen of them in India alone, where all kinds of hate campaigns are also, social movements of a particular kind. So yes, but again, I'm saying it's misleading and incorrect to place media in a causal role or in a primary causal role. Media has the role of magnification. Media has the role of creating new synergies, but the causal role is elsewhere. Somebody is teaching people to hate or love or whatever, right? Or to become fans of this or that, or whatever it is that is the craze. It's that teaching activity that we have to focus on, and that is what we have perhaps not been doing enough. Government digital initiatives, yes, and it's a very mixed thing. I know when first Aadhaar came, there was so much opposition. I was among those who were opposing Aadhaar. Now, just out of sheer weight, and the government has just, outlasted everybody and just made it, in effect, mandatory everywhere. I remember in Rajasthan, it was promoted as for poor people, that Aadhaar was the great godsend for poor people and for migrant workers and so on, because it was a surefire form of identity that was perfectly portable. But innumerable problems came up. So old people, their fingerprints wouldn't get registered properly. So people eligible for pensions of various kinds in rural Rajasthan had a lot of trouble. with that. And the thing is that once you go to this digital form of identification, and the digital form of identification refuses to identify you, you don't have options. Like before, when you took a paper card to someone and that paper card got, waterlogged somewhere and, it has got all smudged, then there were human beings you could argue with and say that, this happened, that happened, and, try to sort of get around. Now, when the machine doesn't accept your fingerprint, the person says machine is not accepting. That's that. And you can't talk to the machine, right? You can't do anything with the machine. So there were lots of problems of this sort that get created because of digitization. On the other hand, there are also many good points as well, because so much information, the right to information has worked very well with digitization, because so much information can now be made public or is made public and is available for people to look at and so on. So it's very, it's both ways, and you have to look at a particular context where to see which is working out in that particular context. But as I said, this is a subject that is much closer to you than it is to me in terms of, both experience with it and, facility with it. So you should think more about this, because it's only going to become a larger part of lives. It's only people like me who can, afford not to be on social media. But your generation cannot afford to be out of social media. Everything happens on social media now. Job offers. Someone was talking about, Puri was talking about how Twitter is the cutting edge. My cardiologist, my friend, who's a cardiologist, who's super well trained and so on, I was shocked when he said that the best and cutting edge discussions in cardiology are happening on Twitter. I could not believe it. I mean, what can you say in 140 characters? But apparently there are ways to, do it. And the papers are written now. The equivalent of papers are being written on Twitter. And how do you send diagrams, etc.? Anyway, I'm just ignorant, so don't ignore what I say about all this. But I do know this is happening. And well, I mean, I was hoping that things like a very strict word limit would make people talk more sense, or at least the proportion of sense they talked would go up. That has not happened, unfortunately. So the media constraint on speech is not really producing more concise and accurate expression. We have to work harder for that. That's it, right? Mostly.
Can I add some small insight?
Yes, please.
So this is just regarding your cardio thing. So just in the morning, I was reading about a journal. It was a cutting edge Q and Scopus list journal, and they were charging huge sum of money from the medical professionals if they want to publish their article with a timeline of just a week or 2 weeks max. So in medical professional and majorly in sciences, time is money basically. So everything is running against the time, and they want to get it published just as soon as possible.
Ranveer, you're behind the times. There are offers now for publishing with backdate.
That's thanks to this API thing which is happening. So, but other than this, so this is regarding Jay was just very much curious about AI since yesterday and day before. So I was thinking, Jay, that when we are talking about AI, so most of the times we are looking for answers, certain kind of answers. And AI is just with some predefined syntax, formulas, permutation, combination. It is just reverting back with the information, whatever it has. Now, again, I would like to say one thing that I also take one session with my students that because whenever we ask them to read something, they always, the first thing which every student do is they Google. So now I try to train them that this is not only about the answer you are looking for, but what kind of question you are posing. This is also very much important. So AI is giving us the answers, but how we are framing the question, what kind of question we are framing, what is the context, this I think this is the beyond the capacity of AI itself, because AI is not getting trained for that particular dimension.
Right.
And I think when we are talking about this whole that how we are seeing dialogue within that ISM's broader impact on the communication, I think this could be a takeaway that ISM is loaded with lot of opinion by so many different people. Now that is giving us what we are seeking for. For example, I watched a particular kind of thematic meme or some reel or something. So internet is designed in a way that it will be showing me the similar kind of content for next 40 days until unless I'm just changing this thing. A lively example is just I have a 4-year kid at home, and whenever I open the YouTube, it's cartoon everywhere. But internet is so smart. When I get up early in the morning, it knows that the person who owns this user ID, in the morning hour he never watch cartoon. In the morning hour I never see those cartoons. So now this flow of information, this is not unidimensional in nature as most of the times we think it is. This is also the kind of our engagement with that. So if we see that as a dialogue, as a form of dialogue, this is a answer in term of this IT ISM. I will be saying that just your movement of your mouse cursor, the moment of click, movement of tap, that's a form of dialogue. So how we are forming those kind of dialogue, it totally depends that what kind of response we are getting. So this is just a small insight. If anybody would like to contribute on that, sir, I would be more than happy to.
Others who haven't spoken yet?
Yes, anyone else? Do we have a question here? Zishana, do you have a question? Any question? Dr. Denny?
Needn't be a
Any question from us?
Hello. Hi. 1 second. Yeah.
Did Denny want to say something? I thought you switched on your mic, Denny.
Yeah, actually, sir, I don't have any questions as such, but as you told in the beginning, with you said you're not an expert on this, but still you have a lot of clarity on this topic. So I was thinking if you were actually an expert, then it will be like I don't know what to imagine. So
No. Clarity can be also misleading. Yeah. Don't be taken in by that necessarily. It's a good thing. I'm all for clarity. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I mean, I really am not an expert on this, and you should, those warning labels. So I feel it's my responsibility to have those warning. But it's as all of you are showing so well. It's something that concerns all of us. There's no question about that. There's no doubt about that. And that's what provides motivation for each one of us to think about it. And after all, that's what education is about, right? You have to think about your life. You have to think about what's happening around you and respond to it in some way. Yes, I think Jay wanted to say something.
I didn't have a question. I had a more of a comment on what Ranveer sir said, that right how much of our life is now dictated by an algorithm. It's not AI precisely. It's an algorithm that basically understands your habits. It understands what you watch. It understands what you basically like. Right. So if you go on YouTube and you click like on basically 2 videos in the same sort of content category, like So if I give my example, I like to watch gaming videos on YouTube, right? So if I click like on to the YouTube will only recommend me, channels with similar type of content, and that algorithm has sort of bled into a lot of social media as well. Your posts and your tweets and all that will be curated by what the algorithm understands that you watch most frequently and what you will be most interested in. And basically, if you use Google, essentially all your data and all your habit is consolidated by Google in its servers. You can access it in settings also, and it'll show you your content habits. So it's very interesting how basically discourse is no longer also sort of individualized. It is also it's curated for you now. Your opinions, and your opinions are basically handed to you on a silver platter now. Because if I say, for example, subscribe to a certain political ideology, it doesn't even take that much of an effort to for my internet searches to reflect those ideologies. Basically, I'll be getting that content, and that basically puts you in this loop of rabbit hole of echo chamber, where you only are exposed to that particular thing, and you basically never come out of that bubble. So that was
Jay, just one small addition. When you were just saying this thing, it just came to my head. I think it's important to mention here. Now, whenever we see something to subscribe or just pay some attention to one particular kind of content, when Professor Satish was saying that the control of the information handled so precisely by very few players, that I will give you a very live example. I watch News Laundry very frequently, but YouTube never suggests News Laundry in my other kind of content. So this is a selectivism is within happening also just within that algorithm.
It basically understands, right? Because if it's a YouTube sort of exclusive thing, because News Foundry, I'm assuming, is a YouTube channel. So because since I'm basically the youngest person in my family by almost 2 decades, right? So I handle my grandparents' internet and all that thing as well. So they use YouTube primarily. So they want to watch Kirtan in the evening. So whenever the Gurdwara is live streaming, I have to go upstairs and basically put it on the TV. And YouTube understands this because I have made a separate Gmail account for them to log into YouTube for the TV and phones. And if on their Google also, if you look at the searches that come up, it's in Punjabi. It's usually of a religious nature. It's recommending Gurdwara and Kirtan and Katha essentially to them. And basically, since it's a shared account, my grandmother watches a lot of cooking videos, so she gets the advertisements she gets are it's focused on the kitchen utensils, new dishwashers, new utensils that have come up, new spices and new recipes that have come up. So it's I agree that the content that you watch is now no longer the content that it basically now pigeonholes you into a certain framework. It's very hard to break out of that bubble. My point is that it's very easy to now get cornered in your own little space in the internet now, because every search you make is basically building a block. It's building a brick in the wall that isolates you essentially. That was my point.
All right, Jai, thank you so much. I would like all of you to participate in this and bring out your questions, take out your curiosity and ask. We have not much of the time.
I would very much welcome answers.
All right. So anyone who need to add something, any comment, or what you can do, you can introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, your name, you're from, so that we can know you better. Okay, Zalil, you want to say something?
Yeah, it's just addition to what Jay and Professor Ranveer said. There is a kind of reverse searching system. Reverse searching system means, what do you want? Please don't go with searching. Just do research in a reverse model. Even in Googling also there is a kind of methods, and it's basically algorithm works within a single matter. It's not differentiate between the in each and every platform. The only difference that I noticed, and in a global situation, is the algorithm of X. It's basically connected with the, it's a deep conflict between the one guy, that means, I don't know, what is name? X, yeah. Sorry, anyway, Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, yeah, okay. Basically, there is a deep conflict between the Elon Musk and Zuckerberg in regards of the AI and social media usage and all things. That's the only reason the changing of algorithm of X in any other platforms of social media. And there is a special criteria to overcome this kind of. It's very difficult, and it's very hard to overcome this kind of algorithm system. But there is a system, that's the reverse research system. Reverse research means if you want something, please don't research in that material in that way. Please go within what is the critics of, then just example, if you want the criticism of the right-wing politics, this is the very easily we can convince this example. That's if we want about the criticism of the right-wing politics, then we have to research on the advantage or the very pro kind of narrations of the right-wing politics. Then we have to do many things, and we make a kind of analytical kind of reading of these narrations and make it and prompt it through the Google research. That's there is a very systematic, I don't know exactly, there is a very systematic research method of reverse researching. That's only my addition.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you so much. Anyone? Vikash? Rishikanta?
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. This is a quite interesting topic, and I just resonate with the point surveillance and control. I came across these things. I want to share incidents. Some of my friends are in a visit to Gorakhpur in the temple, Gorakhpur temple, and after that we personally I had phone call in WhatsApp, and this is kind of surprising in India and in UP. The new kind of control the system is doing, because we are 7 of people from different states, and now I am understanding that we are not doing what we want to do. We are buying in the influence of the people who running the companies and advertisement. It kind of concern the thing we are living in. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikash. Thank you so much. I can agree with you. Whatever you said right now, it's the influence of the companies, their marketing strategies. They do really work on psychology of the people. All right. Anyone else? Shiva Patel, do you want to add something?
Good evening. Good evening, ma'am.
Can't hear you.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Sir, I am audible?
Now you're audible, yes.
So myself is Shiva Patel, sir. Presently, I am studying in Delhi University, third year, sir, BA Honors in Philosophy. सर my basic doubt is sir अभी तो सर मैंने ये start किया sir I not understand as much but sir I realize sir how I increase my thinking level at the sir जैसे आप लोग भी बात कर रहे थे सर तो how understand it easily sir how connect the things in very recent manner. Thank you sir.
All right. So thank you so much, sir, for your precious time. And as we conclude this enriching session, it's essential to remember that in a world full of voices, the strength of dialogue lies not in the loudest, but in the most thoughtful. Today's discussion has truly highlighted how we can foster meaningful conversations in this digital age, something we must all take forward in our daily interactions. A huge thank you to our speaker for taking the time to engage with us today as part of In Dialogue Foundation Certificate course in Dialogue Studies. Your insights on navigating the challenges of dialogue in the age of social media. Sorry, you changed the topic. Were incredibly impactful, especially the focus on misinformation and encouraging the realizations what we are doing on. I'm confident that students have gained a lot from your talk, just as they have from your previous sessions, which are also available on our YouTube channel. For those who would like to revisit them, we took a session in 2020, I guess. Lastly, participants keep an eye out on the reflection forms, which will be sent to you via email shortly. And thank you all for being part of this wonderful session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you,
so much.
everyone. Thank you.